This is Lenovo's most budget ThinkPad offering for 2023. This is the 15-inch model, the L15. They also make a 14-inch model, the L14, for example. This is the Intel model here. They also do have an AMD model. So depending on your preference, if you want to go Intel or you want to go AMD, they have both of them for you. The L series laptops from Lenovo are meant to be the most budget-friendly ThinkPads that Lenovo does offer. But at the same time, it still is a true ThinkPad. So where some companies, they have their low-end offerings and they do cut a lot of corners and kind of make it a cheap, kind of low quality offering, the ThinkPad, even when you get into the L series, which is definitely their most budget offering, they still are fairly premium. So typically, if you're looking at a professional style laptop that's going to be more budget friendly, the L series here is a good option for a lot of people. You do cut the cost down quite a bit, and you don't get some of the nice to haves that the X series and the T series have for them. You get a 15-inch screen here, full ThinkPad keyboard with numpad. You get the trackpad and the trackpoint nib. Decent enough screen for what it is, and all in all, it's just basically a ThinkPad, but it's a lower cost ThinkPad. Let's have a look at some configurations here. There is the AMD model, but we're going to focus on the Intel model here today. So we have 5 different options. They're all U model Intel 13th gen processors, so they're going to be more E cores than P cores, focused more on efficiency than raw power, but they should still do quite well overall in benchmarks. We start with the 1315U, and we actually, fairly low cost, and then we go all the way up to the 1365U, which is what's equipped on this model here. You can actually see that there's a pretty big jump in price depending on what model you're looking at. So depending on how much you want to spend, you can shoot for what you want here. The 1355U is going to perform, for example, very similar to the 65U. RAM wise, there's, this uses SODIMM RAM. You'll see when I open it up here, they sent me one with 16 gigabytes here. There's 2 slots in there, so you can spec it out how you want. This one here comes with 16 gigabytes. Honestly, personally, I'd probably drop it all the way down, and then I'd pick up some cheap but good quality RAM on Amazon or Newegg or whatever and upgrade that yourself. Storage, again, they're charging quite a bit here for a premium for storage. They are 2242 size NVMe's. You'll see when I open up what we can do here with some different options. I'd probably keep this one low as well. I wouldn't pay the premium there. Screens here, there are a couple options on screens. There's a touch and non-touch screen. They're not super bright, super potent screens or anything like that, but there is some more brightness on the touch screen. You can see it goes from 250 nits up to 300 nits, and 300 nits is actually a fairly respectable brightness there for what it is. So personally, for just 80 bucks, I'd probably jump up to the better screen there and get that touch model. Battery-wise, there's a couple options here. 20 bucks gets you significantly more battery life. Usually on the ThinkPads, it's almost a no-brainer, just get the better battery life. And then there's things like, fingerprint scanners and that you can add on to at your discretion. But I think the battery is pretty much a must-buy. Here's a look at the charger that comes with it. Just a little typical 65-watt Lenovo USB-C charger, meaning you can use really any charger. 285 grams, just a little charger, pretty typical stuff. Weight of the laptop now, if I can get it to stand up, about 1,800 grams. So that is the laptop there. You get your typical kind of ThinkPad textured top. There's some different models. When you get into the super premium stuff like the X1 Carbon and that, they typically have a little bit of something like a rubberized texture. I don't think they use a rubber anymore. They used to, but it's something a little bit like a softer touch texture. This is more plasticky feeling, but it's not like a cheapo material or anything like that. Not the thinnest laptop. It actually looks thicker on camera. I assure you it's not. So that's an HDMI port. You can see it's just slightly thicker than an HDMI port for the bottom, and then the lid is just a little bit thicker, I would say. This is their more budget-friendly lineup, so it's not going to be full of metal and ultra-premium materials, but typically I find Lenovo's plastics are actually quite good. So let's see what we get here. On the left side, we get 2 USB-C ports. One is Thunderbolt, and this one is power, but you can probably use both for power. You can see there. We get our RJ45 Ethernet port, so full Ethernet, HDMI as well, and a USB-A headphone microphone combo jack. So lots of ports on the left side there, quite a bit. And then I believe this is a smart card. This is optional. It's not equipped with them, but you get a smart card on there if need be, if you work in a business office. Right side, micro SD card, interesting. Another USB-A port there, and then your Kensington lock slot and your exhaust. So there's actually a lot of ports on this, all things considered. So inside design principles, typical ThinkPad. This is, a larger screen, so you're going to get enough room for a full numpad over here, which is quite nice actually. Not the biggest trackpad. Obviously you can see here, this is a ThinkPad style trackpad, so it's quite a bit smaller than you get on I don't know, like a Lenovo Legion or something like that, because you also get your dedicated buttons there with your track point. Two little speakers there. They're not very far apart, so you're not going to get huge stereo separation. It's probably going to be fine. Looks like there's a fingerprint reader there too. Camera kill switch up here. So literally just a shutter. So rather than having the BIOS style that some laptops have, this one has a physical kill switch, which, to be honest, I kind of prefer the physical kill switch. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. So yeah, let's open it up and look inside. And let's have a look at the inside. Ooh, nice kind of copper paper there, I guess I call it. I don't know what it's called. To be a bit of a heatsink there. Huge intake area here, which is quite good. And then you get some structural stuff. So that here's a look at the inside of the laptop. It kind of seems like this motherboard is probably adapted to some different models. But let's see what we have here. We have a 46.5 watt-hour battery. Lots of like papery stuff kind of covering up a lot of the elements here. So like right immediately when you open this up, you're not going to be able to find where all your stuff is. But so there's your Wi-Fi right there. So that's obviously upgradable Wi-Fi. We have Intel AX211 Wi-Fi. So that's nice, good, fast Wi-Fi. You can upgrade that down the road if need be. It's paper. Okay, so your first NVMe is under there, 2242. It's literally under that little copper heatsink there. So it's nice that there's a heatsink as well. That'll bring some of the heat away. That's built right in. So if you want to take out your first one with your operating system, it's right under there, and that's a 2242 size. There's no 2280s on this laptop, which is interesting. This was shipped with one singular RAM, which is interesting, but there's a second RAM option there. Let's actually see what this kit is here that they have. I'm going to take out the battery, and then I'm going to see what that kit of RAM is that they sent to me. I might actually, just for test purposes, put in more RAM. I mean, they sent this without it, but because it's a budget option, I might actually add some more because I want to give this thing a fair shot, and having these things in dual channel is important to me. So I'm actually probably going to upgrade that on the spot and just see. But let's see what they gave us. Okay, battery's out. And so now we can take this out without any risks. So they gave us RAM cell, that is, a 16 gigabyte kit. And this is DDR4, 3200 megahertz RAM, which is fine. I mean, you can just rock single channel DDR4 RAM. When you spec these out, you build these custom wise, and you can spec out the RAM how you want. But for the purposes of this video, because I don't want to give this thing an unfair review here, let's go get some more RAM and put it in, because typically when I buy ThinkPads myself that aren't review units, I keep the RAM very, very low and I spec them up myself. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a second stick of RAM. It's not 16, but it shouldn't really matter. They're both 3200 megahertz, blah, 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 blah. Typically when I order stuff from Lenovo, when I buy them myself, I always buy the lowest amount of RAM and then I upgrade them myself. OEMs typically do a bit of an upcharge, not always. Sometimes it's fair, just do it through them. But if they're charging $100 for a stick of RAM, just get the base model and then upgrade the RAM yourself. This is just an 8 gigabyte stick, but that means that we'll have 16 gigabytes in dual channel. The extra 8 won't be, but for testing purposes, Cinebench, all that kind of stuff, it's important to have dual channel memory. So typical layout here for a ThinkPad, typically the 15-inch or larger have a numpad on the side. Some people don't like numpads. I use a numpad all the time, and ThinkPads are leaning a bit towards more professional, so typically that's what they would want. You do have the slightly off-centered trackpad, but it's centered to the numpad, right? So you're just typing over here and using trackpad over here rather than having it closer to this here. And that reason is because of the track point. People may not understand why they do that, but it's because the track point is centered and you need to have access to that. So let's do our little typing test. I already typed out a little bit here. Okay, so the ThinkPads now apparently come in like 2 different models for the keyboards themselves. This is the slightly lower profile keyboard. It still has all the travel that it still has a lot of travel like most ThinkPads, but the actual keycaps are a little bit physically smaller. So if you get a T series or some of the thicker ThinkPads, maybe the keycap is that big, and on this one the actual keycap is slightly smaller. Not too much keyboard flex. There is, because it's a plastic keyboard there, but when you're actually typing, it's not flexing. There is, it's a large keyboard with a plastic deck. So there's a little bit of flex in the middle if you're actually pushing on it. But when you're actually typing, it's fine. And the thing is, keyboards on ThinkPads are nice and snappy, so it's no big deal. Trackpad itself, obviously, it's not huge, and that's because ThinkPads typically have a standard trackpad. So it's nice and smooth textured, feels nice and precise. Lenovo in general has really nice trackpads, and it's smaller because it has these buttons up here which you use with the track point. So the track point is basically your mouse alternative. So you can go like that, you know, left click, right click, scroll. So you can use this for scrolling. You can see that. Okay, so we're going to do our audio test now. We'll start at around 50 or so. Turn it up all the way and get some volume here. Certainly loud. Okay, so it sounds nice and clear. There's no distortion, no tinniness or anything like that. It doesn't have low-end bass. These ThinkPads that are, you know, the thinner or lower models of the ThinkPads typically don't have a ton of bass. Usually you're getting into, you know, like the Lenovo Legions or the Slim series, the Lenovo Slims. That's where you typically get a lot more bass. Okay, now we'll listen to my brother's video here and get some kind of spoken tests here to see how it sounds in terms of just vocals, typically for meetings and that.
Team Chaotix, comprised of Charmy the Bee, Vector the Crocodile, and the definite contender for the ugliest Sonic character of all time, Espio the Chameleon. So with that out of the way, let's hop in and see what kind of insane nonsense is going on here story-wise. Each campaign starts...
Yeah, so it sounds great. I mean, the only thing lacking from the speakers, it doesn't have a ton of bass. We'll do a screen test here. This is no like creator-focused screen. It's not going to have the absolute best color accuracy and range, but Lenovo does calibrate their screens pretty well. So typically I find that when, you know, the screen doesn't have the best color range, the reds here normally don't pop quite as much. They come out with a little bit more of an orange tone to them. It looks fine, but it's certainly not super accurate. And you can see here, I'll bring this down slightly here, there's absolutely no bloom on the screen. The ones that are not 100% sRGB, they don't have the best color range, but they typically do have good contrast. You can see here there's no bloom or anything like that. So typically, you know, you get like a bloom where it looks like that if the screen's being pinched, or you get a little bit of bleed in. None of that on the screen here. So that's pretty good. The reds are a little muted. They're still bright and everything, but they're a little bit orange. It actually looks worse on camera. They look a little bit more red in person, but the blues look good. The green looks good. Yeah, so it looks fine. The colors aren't incredible. Partially, you know, it's a 1080p screen. It's a big 1080p screen, so, you know, it's not going to be the finest resolution, but that's also going to save you battery life because, you know, if you had a 3.2K screen on this or a 4K screen, your battery would go pretty quick. Okay, now I'm running some Cinebench here. Looks like we're getting around 9,000, or we get 8,600 or so. That's probably about right for the CPU. And you can see here we are getting some throttling, obviously. These chips here, they're not, you know, the cooling on these ThinkPads is not like massively overpowered or anything like that. So we're getting a little bit of throttling there, but the scores are okay. And the fans are nice and quiet, you can see here. So I guess they're trading off some temperature for fan noise. Well under 40 dB. So the fans are going, but they're not problematic. Like you could be sitting right beside someone and that wouldn't bother them with this. Let's have a look at some benchmark scores here. So you can see here that this is just the U variant of these 13th gen processors. So they're lower wattage and they have more efficiency cores. But the scores here are pretty reasonable overall, you know, around 8,000 or so. Not super high, not super low overall. They could be a little better if the cooling was beefed up a bit. You can see we are getting some thermal throttling on the right side of this image here. But, you know, this is not designed to be some massive 4K editing monster, but it is still very capable for what it is. Over here we can see the SSD that's included is a Western Digital SN740, which is a very good SSD. And you can see here that we're getting really good reads and writes. And overall, this is quite a good SSD. Battery life is actually surprisingly good on this laptop here. We only have that smaller battery in here, and you can spec that up with a higher watt-hour battery, which I'd highly recommend doing. You can see here that on basically idle, you know, just hanging out, just best power efficiency, not battery saver, we're getting 7 hours of battery or so. So that's actually quite good there. And even when we move over here to some 1080p 60 YouTube, we're still getting just shy of 6 hours on that. So that lower wattage CPU is a good balance between being reasonably capable and powerful, but not draining a lot of battery, despite the fact that we have that really small battery in here. So I'd highly recommend upping the battery size here, and you should be able to get, 7 or 8 hours out of this laptop here. So what do I think of the L15 here? This is the Intel model. There is the AMD model as well. I mean, which model you get is really up to you, which you prefer. I think they're pretty good. I mean, it's nice to see that they don't totally nerf the, the lower budget offerings, the L series, which is, I believe, their most budget-friendly offering. They also have the E series, but I think the L is the most budget-friendly. But Lenovo doesn't, nerf them. Some brands, they just, I don't know, something about their lower-end stuff, they just are crapware, basically. Lenovo, if they're going to slap the ThinkPad logo on it, typically, at least there's a bare minimum quality that they maintain here. And, you do get some plastic on the L series here, but it's good. It's not like a cheapo kind of plastic where you feel like you're buying some garbage cheapo laptop, and the screen is really not bright and everything is cheap and the keyboard is trash. I mean, overall, it's a ThinkPad. Through and through, it's a 15-inch ThinkPad. If you're looking for, obviously, a more premium one around this size, you're going to move up to, the T series or the P series. But those can add considerable cost to the price of the laptop. Whereas, if you get yourself one of these L series models here, and you're just looking for a basic day-to-day laptop for business use, school use, media use, typing up essays, that kind of thing, but you want to get a full-size one with a keypad, numpad as well, all of that. This is a great offering from Lenovo. Of course, there is other models. There's the L14. If you don't need the numpad here and you want to make it a bit smaller, you can step yourself down to the L14. 15 inches is actually a nice size, I think, kind of in between for a lot of people because it's not super heavy. You get a larger screen here, meaning you can do more professional work on it. When you get down to smaller laptops, they're great for just typing essays and, basic use, but they get to the point where you start to compromise professional workflow when you make the screen too small. So 15-inch, I find, is probably, on average, the most versatile for a lot of people. I don't see any major compromises on this laptop at all. Keyboard is obviously fantastic, like any Lenovo keyboard. It's great. The screen is fine. I do wish that there was a high-resolution screen offering, and maybe there will be down the road. This is a newer laptop. Sometimes Lenovo puts out these, the 1080p screens at first, and then potentially adds in another SKU. Typically, on the lower end stuff, it's not guaranteed if they're going to add another screen, but I'd like to see, one other option, maybe a 1600p screen like the E series. If you really need that larger screen, if you do need a finer resolution screen, you really absolutely need it. Check out my review of the E16, which I'll put a little box here in the corner at the end here so we can have a look. So you can have a look at the E16 because the AMD model of the E16, which is a very, very similar laptop, there is a 1600p screen offering, which is outstanding. So if you're okay with the 1080p offering, probably lean you towards the L15 because you do bring down the cost even from that E model a little bit there. And it's a fully equipped laptop. If you're like me and you've used ThinkPads over the years, you're going to love this one as well. It's a ThinkPad through and through.